Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Kimberly Cloud Show. I'm your host, Kimberly Cloud. Today, we will be talking about mental health, and I have two special guests, Shannon Curtis and Nikki, for the show today. So, I wanted to get a little bit about their bios and basically what mental health means to them. So, let's join them on the show. Hi, everybody. How are y'all doing today? You
I'm
doing
great.
good,
Doing
Nikki?
great. Yes, ma'am.
I wanted to start with you, Nikki, and ask you about what mental health means to you and a little bit about your bio, and you can start. You have the floor.
All right. Well, thanks for having me here. I'm very excited to share. My name is Nikki Anarado. I'm founder of Prepare to Be Pursued. What mental health means to me is essentially having the capacity to live a normal life. And that can be defined differently based on the goals of the individual. But in times of grief or despair, or in my case, recovering from a breakup, that's something that's pretty normal that I help women through.
Yeah.
Is getting to that baseline of normalcy within themselves and their emotional state and mental capacity. Um, is what I'm very, very familiar in. Although I'm not really a mental health professional in the lane of therapy and things of that nature, um, I help women actually get results in their personal life and their romantic lives, despite the past that they've experienced. So it's more of the functionality of how to do that, how to navigate things day to day. And so, what comes up very, very commonly in this is understanding how our mindset, how our emotional state impacts the results we get with ourselves, or we view ourselves, and also with other people. And so, I'm very glad to be here to talk more about it.
Okay. And Miss Curtis, what does mental health mean to you? And tell me a little bit about your bio.
Yeah, first I want to say again, thank you for having me on again. It's been a great pleasure being here. And when I think of the word mental health, I think of like peace of mind. I think of like connecting the mind, body, and soul together. And so, just like she said, it doesn't matter if our specialties, work, relationships, anything, it all comes back to that peace within and that mental aspect of, can you find the peace that no matter where you are in your life, no matter what's going on, you can always come back to that place of peace and understanding. And so I really love this topic because it can get used in work, but then it can also get transferred back to home in your relationships, how you parent, all those things, because the way we act at work is usually the way we act probably at home, I would imagine. There's very, patterns that we do in relationships. And so it's no different, just stopping to really understand why we act the way we do. So then we can start to really deep dive and start doing that healing process of, are we coming from our wounded selves? Are we coming from like our adapted, healed self? And so that's really what I specialize in as a coach, is just like transformational intuitive coach. I just use my gifts to help other people just really, look into their lives and see wherever it is in their life. I struggled with addiction. I've had miscarriages, divorce, all kinds of things that I've had on my journey. And so what I found is pain is pain is pain. And it doesn't matter what we're trying to heal from. I found that the results are usually the same of, once you go within and find the love for yourself, that peace and clarity comes.
Well said. Writing down your negative thoughts, especially in mental health, and coming back to them to change it is another tool. Tell me about a story, Shannon, of a friend or family member who have suffered from mental health and what you have done to comfort them.
Yeah, so I have actually my partner, and he's very open at speaking with this, so I'm okay talking about it. But he's struggled with depression, was a vet, and he's done the plant medicine route that I have, and has seen huge transformations. But his depression was really hard and suicidal. And what I've learned is, even though I've struggled with depression, but not necessarily suicidal thoughts. It comes from the same place of wanting something like almost to die within you, something inside of of you is saying it just doesn't feel right, and we just don't know how to work through that. And so seeing his transformation of that, what I've learned is my job is only to hold space for him. That's all my job is, to reflect back the love that I see in him, but it's not my job to come in and to rescue. And so it's really hard when we're with people that maybe are struggling with mental health, because it's that balance of like codependency and going in and trying to rescue, but then also stand in our truth. And so it's been a real quite journey. And even my daughter, you know, I have a 15-year-old daughter. And so it's the same thing when she has her ups and downs as a teenager. It's not my job to just make it go away and or make it better. It's my job to show her that she has the tools and the power to walk through that pain. And so again, bringing it back to mental health, I just think it goes across the board as far as depression, anxiety, all those things, they all stem from the brain. And what I work with my clients a lot in is to go from the head to the heart, because that's where the answers really lie, at least that I've been aware of. And so the mental stuff stems from the brain, but when you come to the heart and you bring it all back to love and understanding, it's a gentle way to walk people through that are going through mental issues.
Well said. Tell me, Nikki, your perspective on this.
For sure. Yeah, life is such an amazing journey. I have a lot of experience in this in regards to like my family and friends, and that's what ultimately led me to become a coach. Because I didn't realize how often people will just come to me. I'm like the first person they will think of whenever they're going through a challenging time. And so one of the things I can kind of point out, I think she'll be okay with me sharing this, is my daughter, just as Shannon shared, having a teenage daughter at a time when my daughter was a teenager. She's 24 now, but during that time, it was a very, very rough time for her. Self-identity, just kind of knowing who she was and it not really being reflected in her environment. So just that confusion of not being able to be herself and be accepted at the same time. And so kind of guiding her through that, because there was temptation a lot for her to just go into the depth of where it can take a young person that doesn't understand that on the other side, there is freedom, is more to life than high school. You know, there's something on the other side. And unfortunately, a lot of kids don't get that opportunity to get to the other side. So it was very heart-wrenching for me to watch her go through that painful, painful place, but to keep her encouraged, to keep her even beyond what she can believe for herself, to just start to expose her to different parts of herself so that she can have enough strength to get to the other side, which she's on now, you know? And so that was a huge, huge challenge for me. It's one of the most challenging things I've ever had to do, was to keep her motivated and keep her clear and keep her from really believing some of the misinformation that's out there about herself, you know? And so, yeah, I have a huge passion about this, about just women in general, really, because sometimes women are still struggling with some of those identity things, even in our adulthood. And if society pushes a narrative on us, it's very difficult for us to stay strong in who we actually know ourselves to be. And so, yeah, it's a huge passion of mine.
So, Nikki, do you feel
Mhm.
like men sometimes get stigmatized about mental health?
100%.
Tell me why.
100%. Yeah. Yeah, my heart goes out really to men. And one of the more recent appearances I had last week on another person's podcast, we don't have to get into that, but one of the parting things he asked me is, what is your message out to men? Because I primarily work with women. And so that is something that I hope to convey in my message, is that men, you are important too. So the way that the society kind of structures men in their place is that they're expendable, that we don't see it because we're women, you know what I mean? And they have all this bravado and all this kind of stuff. But when you really think about the way that they're positioned, like they have the most dangerous jobs, you know, if there's a dangerous situation, they are the ones that have to volunteer themselves. They're the one that, and they just kind of innately know that. But part of that for that to be true, I imagine part of that is they have to almost reduce their worth, their self-worth, so that they can agree to be sacrificial, if that makes sense. I hope that's making sense. And so a lot of times men struggle with self-worth, basically. They might have the bravado, they might demand this and demand that and all this. But when you get them in a quiet place and actually talk to them, they really don't have a huge connection with themselves and see themselves as worthy of peace. They see it not having peace as part of a man's lot in life, essentially. This is what makes me a man. Me holding everything in makes me a man. This makes me stronger. This is how I identify. We don't have, a lot of opportunities for men to exercise some of that stuff outside of sports. So
Emotions.
it's just, unfortunately, it's the conditioning, I think. And so maybe it could be an opportunity for women to start to slowly and gently infuse some of this into a man's walk, either through their partnership or through parenting.
Shannon, you have the floor. Do men get stigmatized about mental health?
Yeah, I agree with some things that Nikki was saying for sure, because I've seen it firsthand. I do work with men. And the first thing I recognized when she was talking about like trying to see where their worth comes from. And I think so much of the worth comes from their protector role that we kind of place on them, kind of like the women, we get placed the nurturing role. And so when we go outside of those roles, it can feel really uncomfortable and scary. And so when you look outside of yourself as what am I more than a protector? And that's really my partner. We have really had this beautiful dance and journey together of, I truly believe there's a divine masculine and feminine in everybody. And so he really helped me like raise my masculine in me. And that's my doingness and my protectiveness and my power. And then I helped him raise his divine feminine, of that nurturing and that loving and that mothering. And again, I'm a big one on inner child work and going back and like healing the child and giving the love that you needed. And so I really do think that I resonated a lot with that men, little boys, really, it starts with that, aren't getting that nurturing, loving to be whoever they want to be, and to like nurture both sides of, yes, they have strength and power and there's a place for all of that, but there's always a place for the other side of it too. And again, back to mental health, that peace within. And so it's all a balance. And so I think as women too, we need that. We need a place to feel powerful and protected. But yeah, I just think that unfortunately men have their own stigma that we get as women, but I have seen that. And so what I've really tried to create here is a safe space for men to come in and let their walls down and not be judged. And if they want to cry, cry, or if they want to yell, scream, whatever they want to do, but it's really taking them back to that place of safety of maybe we didn't get it as a child. You know, you hurt your knee and what does the parent say? It's okay. It's okay. But maybe a little child at that time, it doesn't feel okay. It feels like the worst thing that's ever happened. And so it's learning to honor the feelings as they come. And so I think if we can just start honoring men's true feelings of whether it is just the unworthiness or worthy, but really checking in to see what ultimately are you feeling worthy about. And I love how Nikki said that sometimes I can see how their worthiness might come outside of themselves because it's set up that way. I work with a lot of vets. My partner's a vet and I work with a lot of them. And that's what I see is when they come home, who am I outside of protecting and doing all these things? And so it's been some of the most beautiful transformations I've got to witness are these men that like finally step into their love and light and their divine feminine, and they start feeling those feelings of love. And then before you know it, it just gets balanced and they have this beautiful balance within themselves of knowing that they can be a man and they have a place in that. But it's also okay to have that nurturing and to show your feelings and be vulnerable.
Well said, Shannon. Well said. And I feel like they get stigmatized a lot, and that we have to peel back like a banana there what's going on in the process of them healing, because they cannot heal without encouragement. They cannot heal without the right people near them. So, um, Shannon, I wanted to know, how does trauma cause mental health?
Well, to me, it all starts with trauma. Those are those things, those little things that happen to us. And I say there's big T's or little T's. So could there be little traumas of maybe a friend talked bad about you, or a boy broke up with you? And then there's the big ones like divorce or death or all these other things. And so they all, even the little T's add up to a big thing. And so what happens sometimes is people don't really want to acknowledge the traumas. And I get these phone calls and I start talking to guys again, and they're like, oh no, my life was good, everything's great. And then they start talking about their childhood. I always go back to their childhood, and then they maybe had an abusive dad or an alcoholic dad, and I'm like, wow, that must have been really hard. Well, it's okay. And I think it goes back to that stigma of sometimes it feels like you have to suffer to be a man, like you have to suck it up, and if your dad was abusive, that's just what men do. And so I really help them and say that's maybe not, maybe there's another way, maybe that little boy needed to be loved. And so that trauma starts to get built into this mental space of I have to suffer. So you see that in the relationship, staying in a relationship maybe too long, staying in a job too long, having a boss that doesn't treat you well, a friend, whatever it is, those always go back to some core trauma wound where we're thought we're not worthy of love, we're not worthy of this whole like relationship, of this balance. And so I just think trauma is something that we don't talk about enough, and it's the yucky traumas. Like I said, obviously I do a lot of work with sexual trauma and healing my own, but that's what I found is it's these uncomfortable conversations that the more we start to talk about it, the more the men and the women that aren't comfortable will start to, because then it becomes the norm. Because that's one thing we all have in common is we all have pain and we all have wounds. And so once we come up from a place of like understanding that we're all more alike than we're different, we can start that journey, and we can start that healing, the men and the women together, and realize, I think it's like the yin and the yang, the black and the white. There's so much beauty in my male partnership that he gives to me that I give to him, but we start with it whole within ourselves. And then when we come together, it creates this beautiful thing. And that's always my hope for other people, is to be able to experience that. But I had to go through divorce. I had 15 years of maybe not being authentically myself in a partnership that was out of balance. And so I just think that, again, when we start to understand trauma, it's like, duh, when we really think about it, why it would affect our mental health. I mean, it just goes hand in hand. And so if we start with our mental health, that's okay, but just keep going down and going down till you finally get to that core wound. And most of the time what I found is it's something in childhood. And even though maybe traumas happen later in life, they do, but it's that back. I always say you have to go all the way back to the beginning. And once you heal that, then you kind of understand maybe why these other things happen, because of maybe situations that we put ourselves in because of, again, not feeling unworthy. And so I just think that's a great question of how trauma and mental health really tie together.
Well said. And how about you, Nikki? How does how does trauma cause mental health?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything that was just shared. It's a very distinct connection, and there's so much research out there between our past and the way we process our current lives and the opportunities that we might have. And at times, we're walking around and we don't really understand that there might be a part of the way we're processing information that could be improved. There could be an area where if we snap to a different way to view the world, view a situation, view ourselves even, we will have more favorable results. So there's a lot of times where the women I work with, they're not even aware that they're suffering from social anxiety. They're not even aware that they're stressed beyond measure. You're not even connected to those things. So I'll just share a little bit about my expertise, because I don't like to talk outside of what my focus is, because I don't know. So my focus is mostly preparing women to date and bring somebody into their life. Maybe they have not dated for a long time, or maybe they have, but they're not having the experiences that they know they're deserving of. So in that, a lot of the work we do is let's just look at what's happening right now. And just as Shannon said, sometimes it does peel back the layers all the way to childhood. Sometimes it peels back the layers further and far enough for them to reassess a recent relationship. But what is ultimately always consistently the case is what I call a destructive dating cycle, okay? Where there's a root fear, where there's a mindset that is problematic, and there's a defense mechanism, okay? So the defense mechanism, we're all familiar with that is a behavior. The fear is the emotion, the mindset is our mental view of the world, and then the defense mechanism is our behavior. So our behavior sometimes we're doing the best we can to cope, right? But sometimes we're the last to know that what we're doing is against our best interests. Sometimes we're the last to know that. And so once we are, that's the easiest, simplest way, sometimes it is, to recognize that there's something deeper going on, is when a person realizes that, whoa, I've been doing that and that's been leading to this outcome. I didn't even know that, you know? And
Great
then
observation.
track it to the original fear. And then behind the fear, there's pain, there's trauma, and things like that. So yeah, it's unfolding in a way a person can kind of just see if something's going on, is to again see what's the outcome of your life, what are the patterns, and then just become a little bit curious about how we might be participating in those outcomes and how to change it.
You know, some of the trauma that I've been through has caused my mental health. And I go back and, like I said prior to this, I jot down basically what is negative. And that's why I urge people out there that are watching to jot down the negative thinking, because if you don't, you know, you won't know. You get 6 to 10,000 thoughts a day. You won't know, you know, the negative thoughts, all of them that come through your mind. So I have another question. Do women still get a stigma about of being more inclined of mental health than men? Like back in the 1950s, you know, it was always medication for women, and sometimes it still um, happens a little bit. So, what is your perspective, Nikki, on that?
Um, yeah, I think that there is some shame still needed to kind of clear out within the female community around mental health. Um,
Mm.
you know, I have had conversations with men that, you know, yo, you don't need that. You're okay. Or I can fix you or whatever. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Because I've suffered from depression and anxiety. It was really from a consistent, um, I've always had a bully, you know, kind of situation, even from middle school, as far as I can remember. And I never understood why until my early adulthood, and began to understand that how I was contributing to that, how I didn't stand up for myself, how I didn't create boundaries that I can actually enforce, in just that pattern. And also grief. My mom unfortunately passed away very abruptly in 2020. I talked to her 2 hours before she passed.
I'm sorry to hear that.
I appreciate that so much. And so that rocked my world in a crazy way. I mean, I lost a lot from that. It shook me. And so to peel myself off of the ground, literally, and to get my life back in order took so much. And so I am very, very passionate about removing any stigma around mental health. And no one has to understand why you're going through, why you're going through. It doesn't have to be a socially acceptable reason that brought you to a dark place. You just have to stand up for what you know you can get back to, even though you don't know how, you know. And so, yeah, I think it's a encouragement from our own community of women that understand that we've been through some things and it's okay to get support to get on the other side, because that pride will keep you stuck much longer than necessary if you're thinking that something's wrong with you. Nothing's wrong with your brain. Is doing the appropriate thing. It's trying to make sense of devastation. It's trying to make sense of something that it's not used to calculating. And so I don't know. I feel like I don't know the usefulness of the stigma, but I do hope to see it lessen over time for sure.
I like the way you said, make sense of devastation. Shannon, same question. Do women still get a stigma about being more inclined of mental health than men?
Yeah, I don't know if it's like more inclined or balanced, but I do think there's the stigmas there. Like that at the end of the day, the stigma with mental health is there, whether it's men, women, children, whatever. As a nation, as a country, I just think it's something that people don't talk about. And then we medicate it, we go to the doctor and they give you a prescription, but they don't really ask you what's going on in your life, right? So my perfect example is when I had my first miscarriage, I was going in for my first ultrasound and had no idea, you could even miscarry without anything going on. And so I remember going into the doctor's office and she's like, there was no heartbeat. And I remember, just like Nikki described the instant with her mom, that's how it felt to me. My world came crashing down. And before I left for that appointment, I got a prescription for Valium and for antidepressant, for Lexapro, within that 15-minute conversation. And so that started my journey of with medication, but that didn't really heal the pain. And what I learned that healed the pain is sitting in the pain and understanding the pain. And just like Nikki with her mom, I'm sure that grief taught her something about death is something that we all go through. And so that's the other thing, is it's like the stigma isn't really about that. It's about the underlying thing. We're not talking about our feelings. And then the other thing is with women is the stigma is so much more in women than it is with men. It's within ourselves in our community. And I was just on a podcast the other day for India, and we were talking about sexual trauma, and she said, and I assumed that it was, they don't talk about it a lot because of the men and shamed. And she said, no, it's more the women. And that just broke my heart in pieces, because I can't imagine not having another woman to go to when I'm, dealing with my sexual trauma, that they didn't have that just complete, like, it's okay. And just like Nikki said, to have the compassion of to honor people's journey with mental health and not try to label it. And so I think what happens is we just go and we get help or we don't. And I do think we live in a culture of women that are starting to grow the housewives of the drinking or the Adderall or whatever. And again, that's dealing with mental health. That's all that is the alcohol or the Adderall, whatever you want to call it. It's just dealing with the harshness of being a mom sometimes and a wife, and it can be overwhelming. And so I just think the answer could lie more in supporting each other than the stigma of putting someone down, like you can't keep up. And, and it's all this stuff about keeping up, whose stuff is better. And so, yeah, I would imagine that that's going to build all kinds of anxiety. And then when you don't live up to it, then here comes the depression. And so it's just this little ride that we do on ourselves. And it's just this thing that goes across the board. But yes, in the women, I have seen it a lot that usually we're the hardest on each other. It's like we don't want to have each other succeed. And that's why I love the three of us powerful women coming in today to talk about this stuff and truly hear each other from a place of understanding, and that I can learn from both of y'all. And so it's just, if we can do more of that, I really feel like we can release that stigma.
Well said, Shannon. I'm sorry to hear about your 5 miscarriages. And again, we learn how to hide our emotions, like you said, through the environment, through the nation. We learn how to hide our emotions. And I think we should not hide our emotions. We need to be fruitful and talk about our emotions more, because it's therapeutic. That's how I feel. So tell me, Shannon, how can the people reach you?
Reach me. They can
Yeah.
go to my website. It's www.angelgoddesshealing.com. And that's where all my information is. I do the coaching, the speaking, retreats. And then I obviously have my book that just came out, which is a beautiful children's tale, but it's also for people of all ages. So they can go on there and book appointments. And I always do a free consultation. So if someone's curious what I can offer them, just, set up a time, and I'd love to talk. And I always try to say I meet people where they're at. They don't necessarily have to be where I'm at right now, but I would love to just offer that invitation for anyone who's out there maybe struggling and just wants maybe to look at something different in their life.
if you're struggling, please contact Shannon Curtis. You know, she's a great, wonderful power play woman. So, Nikki, how about you? How can the people reach you?
I would say preparetobepursue.com. And on that, if you go to the About tab, it'll be a link tree list of all my links, including how to get on a quick consultation call with one of my coaches. We also do retreats, in-person events. I just did a VIP date, just got back from Dallas and Oklahoma City. Shout out to my two elite lore ladies, Deneen and Shanisa. Hi, ladies. And in that, I help them navigate social settings without social anxiety. And so they both did amazingly well, and I'm so proud of them. And yeah, I'll be going to other parts of the country later on this year, including LA, Seattle, Ohio, and Arizona. So I'll be in those places later on this year. If anybody's interested to connect or to have an event, I'll be happy to do that in those relative cities. But yeah, all my information, preparetobepursue.com. Also, I have a free 5-day challenge. It's called Make Room for Boaz. Anybody can sign up for that. The links are available on my website as well.
Thank you so much, Nikki. If you want help with romance and relationships, Nikki is your girl to go to. So I want to thank everybody for joining my show today. Stay on the line, you guys. And you take care, you guys. Be safe. And I will see y'all another time. Bye.
Never waste my time. You are I want.